We're joined by Kamran Bokhari in Toronto. He's a fellow with George Washington University's program on extremism and a senior lecturer at the University of Ottawa. He's a frequent guest on our broadcast as well. Cameron, I think last time we spoke, I think you described yourself as a realist about this truce. You weren't holding out a great deal of hope. Has anything changed recently to change your mind?
No, I'm pretty much at the same point where we were when we last spoke. Because it's, we're just going through the motions here. It's only been a few hours, and if Twitter is to be believed, there are already, some incidents reported of fighting here and there. There's just, so much that can go wrong, and that's why it's going to be difficult to see this through.
They have an expression in our country, skin in the game, meaning having a stake in things. Do the United States and Russia, these two major powers, do they have enough skin in the game to make this work? And if not, what more could they be doing?
I think they both realize the limitations and the constraints under which they're operating. So Russia may have a better control over the Assad regime, its Iranian allies, Hezbollah, and all the militias that are pro-regime. On the other hand, the United States does not have that kind of control and over the rebels. And we're talking 97 groups that have signed on, in theory, to this truce. And it's hard to see how they'll abide by this, and how does the United States, hold them accountable? Most of these groups are of Salafist jihadists of one form or another, and so the idea that we're going to somehow separate the extremists from the non-extremists, I find that really hard to believe.
Let me ask you about Turkey, because I think you brought that up last time we were talking as well. Ankara's role in all of this, obviously they'd like to have a stake in whatever happens in the country after this war is resolved. What is the role of Turkey in all of this?
I think Turkey will have the most significant role moving forward. Perhaps it doesn't appear that way right now because Turkey is reluctant. Turkey wants to go into Syria to manage the place as part of an international coalition. It doesn't want to be held responsible. It doesn't want to be the sole actor inside Syria trying to manage the mess, because it's pretty complicated, and the Turks don't want to be the ones holding everything together. So I think over time, as the situation progresses and deteriorates further, the Turks will have no choice. I mean, their subjective preferences will be, one thing, but the objective geopolitical realities on the ground will force them to take, a much bigger role, which is what the United States wants them to do.
And I suppose you weren't surprised at all these raids intensifying before this ceasefire. I guess everyone wants to stake their claim to certain areas before the implementation of this.
Absolutely. I mean, this is standard operating procedure in any theater, in any war, not just Syria, that the belligerents will fight until, just minutes before the ceasefire is supposed to go into effect. I mean, we've seen this all over the world. So it's not unusual for the Russians and the regime to try and consolidate themselves as much as possible, because they know that the other side is about to get some respite. So they wanted to hit them as much as possible before they get some time, some downtime and to recuperate.
What's the most we can hope for looking forward? I mean, everyone's talking about a more permanent ceasefire. You already have your doubts about whether or not this fragile ceasefire will stay in place. What needs to happen next?
Well, I mean, what needs to happen next is essentially for all of these 97 actors to say, you know what, we're going to stick with this. And then the other side, the Assad regime and its allies, also remain committed to the truce, which is very, very hard to see how that will happen. And then the big thing is that this vague distinction between extremists and non-extremists. I mean, from where I stand, most of these groups are extremists by definition. And so I don't know how we can say, okay, Nusra and ISIS are the only bad guys. They top the charts, but they're not the only ones. And Nusra is allied with those who are getting a pass in this truce. So, are those allies of Nusra going to sit by while Nusra gets hit? I don't think so. So this is just, a disaster waiting to happen.
Kamran Bokhari joining us from Toronto. Thanks so much for your observations.